Last month, we had a month-long conversation about Anne Hathaway, of course, called Anne Hathaway, but this month is June, and we're kicking off June Williams, a month-long conversation about film scores and the music of the movies we love. And we have a very special guest today. Please welcome music editor extraordinaire, Rebecca Shrand.
Yay! Thank you so much for having me, y'all. Really appreciate being here.
So what's the difference between a music editor and a sound editor?
Yeah, so they're different classifications. We're part of IATSE 700, which is the editorial guild. So there's music editors, sound editors, Foley editors, picture editors, and basically just sound people deal with sound effects and music people deal with music. And sometimes it gets a little overlapped, but we try to keep it pretty separate.
I'm really excited to talk, and I want to get into one thing quickly, which is a very intense Siskel and Ebert style debate about the movie Babes. I promise this is gonna get. I promise I have a segue to get to film scores and music from this.
Okay.
I went to see the movie Babes for my birthday because there were no movies out this
Happy birthday
week. It was my birthday on Saturday. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you, you guys. Oh my God. Thank you. And I always try to see a movie on my birthday. I wanted to see the movie Babes. And first off, this was the second movie in a row I saw in theaters where I was the only person in the movie theater, which is terrifying to me. And I recognize that will absolutely change my view of the movie. I was excited to see this movie because I love comedies, and for years and years and years, I've been screaming, why aren't there more comedies in theaters? Why aren't there more comedies in theaters? And then Caroline saw it and came and said, hey, everybody, Babes is one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. And I said, yes, I'm so excited. This is a topic I care about. I have 2 kids. I'm really excited to see a movie all about the pregnancy from a realistic perspective. It's not all glamour. There's a lot of stuff that movies don't show you that this movie's promising me that they're going to show me. And I'm very excited about it. And as I was watching the movie, I had a little bit of an existential crisis. Because for the first time, I asked myself, why am I seeing this in a theater? And that scares me. Because I am one of the supporters. Mm-hmm. I am one of the people trying to keep movie theaters alive. I see everything in theaters. I screamed from the top of my lungs when The Idea of You was not in theaters. I think that movie would have been a huge hit. The Anne Hathaway movie. I loved that movie. While I was watching Babes, I took out my phone. And started looking at things. Not because I didn't like the movie. I think the movie's absolutely fine. I think my brain is trained to watch a certain kind of movie by half watching the movie and half being on my phone listening to the movie. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think that's like sort of what we're doing now. I mean, that's why I specifically want to see these in a theater, because if I'm at home, I'm not paying attention. I will half watch the movie. If I'm in a theater, I will turn everything off. My phone's on airplane mode. I'm set. I wish you had been able to see it with a group of people, because I saw it with a group of 5 friends. The theater was sold out, and it was the most I've been in a theater in the last year or so where a theater is laughed on purpose. Like the joy of that community. And I think the perspective of seeing it as a woman, and it's directed by Pamela Adlon, who is a legend. If you need to look up, worked on Simpsons, wrote Better Things, FX. This is her directorial debut. I don't know. I don't know if it's I loved, did you love Broad City?
Yeah, loved Broad City. And that my favorite part of the movie Babes was obviously it wasn't the 2 Broad City people. Alana Glazer, incredible in the movie. The other lead, incredible in the movie.
Michelle Buteau.
Thank you. That type of sense of humor, incredible. I loved that. That was the things I liked about the movie. I found myself not needing to watch the screen because it looked like an FX show. Does that make sense? I feel icky saying this. I recognize that I am the problem right now. No, but it's what I felt.
Do you know what the problem is? Is that you don't live in LA. There is a culture in LA of going to movies together. Caroline comes and talks. I'm sure, Becca, you have a similar experience. You go see movies, and people see movies in LA. They want to see movies There's packed houses. Every time you talk about a movie, you're like, it was packed. Everyone was enjoying it together. I've been to a ton of movies in Nashville, and with the rare exception of like Barbie on opening night and maybe the Spider-Man movie, I have never sat in a full theater in Nashville. Now, I could go to a country concert at any bar in this city, and it's packed. But like the national culture of seeing movies is over. It remains in LA. And it's definitely, in Milwaukee, like go to the cheese curd festival.
Go eat
and, like,
cheese.
it'll
Go
be
eat cheese at a bar. Go eat cheese anywhere they sell beer.
Go
and you are
Wisconsin.
good.
Go watch
Right.
football.
Yeah.
But like I think that's the problem, Eli, is if you lived
That's
in
good.
LA, you would have seen this in a huge theater with a lot of people laughing, and it would have been great. But you saw it alone in a theater, and of course you're going to ask yourself, why am I here? Like, I could be on my couch eating better snacks.
Let me segue us in two ways. One, and this is not necessarily a criticism of the movie, but is a criticism of the idea of exposition in general. I die, as somebody who loves comedy, when a character's exposition is dumped on me in a way that feels lazy. What I mean by that is, if I'd rather see what somebody does for a living than have somebody go buy sushi at a restaurant, go to get their wallet, and as they're getting their wallet, be like, I'm a yoga teacher in my apartment. That's why I have so much gas. Also, my friend is pregnant. I hope I don't get pregnant. That's an exposition dump.
Sure.
I would rather learn about a character through other things. Maybe not through the mise en scène, the things that we see on the screen, but maybe including the things we hear on the screen.
Sure.
Maybe a score can be an exposition dump. See what I'm doing here, Rebecca? I'm telling you.
I was going to ask, are you hearing
Yeah.
music as Eli is so beautifully explaining exposition in film? Like, is music just in your head?
I've heard his exposition in my head.
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
I know a whole suite for him.
Wow. Amazing.
When you talk to people, do you try to come up with a score for the people you are talking to? Like, would my score be like a weird Looney Tunes, like da 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 da, and Ethan's is just the shriek of Hitchcock's knife?
Why?
stabbing someone?
like the psycho score. Yours would definitely be bassoon.
Ooh.
Eli,
Yeah,
for sure.
Love the bassoon.
It feels like the holiday scene, when he's picking the notes for
I'm
Kate
into-
Winslet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, am I Jack Blacking it right now? Is that what you're saying? I guess I am. All right,
This
go ahead.
is School of Rock, isn't it? I thought that's
Yeah.
not here. Okay. I don't hear music for people, but I have done it before where like I've written my friends' theme songs and stuff just for fun.
That's a fun exercise.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought while watching the movie Babes is we talk about spectacle. The Fury Road just came out, made $0. We talk about why are people going to the movies. They're looking for spectacle. And when I immediately think about spectacle, I think, CGI, I think superheroes, I think explosions, I think larger than life. But I do think there is an argument to be made that spectacle is also the music you are hearing.
Sure.
I think Challengers was a spectacle movie because of motherfucking Trent Reznor's score.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's the end of my segue.
Well, can I say like two things in defense of Babes? I think why I loved it is it's hitting at an age of my life where most of my friends are having kids. I'm in the middle of like that, because I'm 34. I had to start thinking about this kind of stuff. And I think it felt really nice. It may not be a spectacle, but it felt nice to see, I think, currently what my friends and I are talking about and my relationships with my friends who have multiple kids reflected on the screen. And it was presented in a way that I've not really seen so relatably presented. And I cried several times. I laughed, guffawed. I think it's if you're wanting a heartwarming, like if you want to think about a movie with like your best friend, it's just like, it's a nice warm hug. And I think it's an I need to see that for me.
Becca, did you always love movies growing up? Obviously, you're a music person. Like, did you always love movies, or was movie something that you found later in life as you were looking how to apply your love of music?
I was actually, I didn't watch a lot of TV or movies growing up. I played some video games. That was about it. But I didn't discover film scoring or video game scoring until my second or third year at Berklee College of Music. So I was a pretty late bloomer, but I always loved music. And tuba was my first and foremost thing. So I thought that I was going to be a tuba player. And then I kind of fell into the film scoring world instead in college.
That's
wow.
What is your whole like music background? I guess like relationship with music before you got into film.
Yeah, I like I said, I played tuba, and I was in a lot of youth orchestras all throughout high school. I toured in Argentina and Iceland with youth orchestras. Went to Interlaken, which was so much fun, and I was on a track to like apply and be a classical tuba player. So I was applying to, Eastman, New Conservatory. I was invited to audition at Curtis. And I honestly got rejected from like every school. I got waitlisted for a few schools as a tuba player. And then I got accepted into Peabody Conservatory, which was my top choice. And then Berklee College of Music as well, but Berklee gave me way more money. So I had to go there. And I loved Berklee. It was like a really life-changing experience because I was playing tuba in ways that I'd never played tuba before. I was in blues ensembles, punk bands, all sorts of just things that I'd never done as a classical player. And I was playing on a lot of people's film scoring sessions. And so I've kind of started to see that world and recording as a studio musician, which was, I really loved that. And I loved playing my friends' music, especially. And then I got sick and I couldn't play tuba for like 3 months while I was at school. And that's when a friend of mine at the time was like, you should try the film scoring major. And so I applied, but you have to pass the film scoring 101 class, which is like a B- or above. And I was not doing well. I was really bad at it. I had to go in and beg my professor to give me a B- so that I could qualify for the major. Because I didn't know anything about the technical side of things. I had said to one of my professors, I was like, well, I don't understand. John Williams would write all of his scores by hand, so why can't I do that? And my professor literally laughed. And it's like, that's just not how it works anymore. And so I got into the major and just really fell in love with it. And there was like a very large learning curve of figuring out all that tech stuff because I had a lot of ideas in my head, but it was getting them out and sounding decent from a production standpoint. That was really hard for me. So I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I had a lot of 4 a.m. emails back and forth with professors at Berklee about how to do things in Pro Tools. And then I graduated during the pandemic in 2020. And it was rough because as a senior, you're supposed to get a capstone, or you have a capstone project, and you're supposed to get a orchestra to record with, and you have 3 hours of session time to record your whole project, and all that was gone for us. All of our resources, we just didn't have anything. So I felt a little, I missed out on that side of it at Berklee, and so I think that kind of made me want to come out to LA a lot faster because I knew that this is where it was going to happen, if it was going to happen. So I packed up my car and drove across the country for 3 weeks, camped the whole way to avoid the plague.
Of course.
And landed in LA. And then within a year, I had my first huge gig at Marvel. So it was a pretty big deal. It was crazy.
All right. Quick question. Are you the coolest person who's ever lived? You're like, yeah, I graduated. It was a pandemic. I rode my car. I camped. And then I worked on Moon Knight. What's up? I'm like, what the fuck? That's so cool.
Thank you.
I want to get into this. I think about the first, like, I was always a cinephile growing up. One of the first movies I saw was Night of the Living Dead because we had a VHS copy and I thought it looked funny. It wasn't. But I always watched movies. I was always the guy of my friend group who saw as many movies as they can. And then freshman year of high school, I met a friend named Chris who was equally into movies. And he used to talk about nonstop the film score of Hudsucker Proxy. And he was the first person I ever met who literally, like, this was back in CDs because I'm 90 years old, but he would have the CD of Hudsucker Proxy and he would just listen to it in between classes as we walked from class to class. Straight up just, maybe he's a sociopath, I don't know, but he would straight up just listen to this music score. And it kind of changed how I watched movies. Out of all the soundtracks you can listen to, Hudsucker Proxy was an interesting one, but it's so good. And it's one I actually still listen to because it left a mark on me. And that was the first time I really noticed that the music we are listening to can change the tone and can change how you are watching a thing. And looking at your IMDb, seeing things like Moon Knight and Miss Marvel and Werewolf by Night and She-Hulk and Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm just reading your IMDb. These are all very different tones. So I can only imagine the amount of work that goes into creating music and creating a theme around each of these.
So, and even still, can you also explain, like, for all of those, like, what you did? What's your particular role within the music department?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a music editor's primary job, we're a liaison, really. So, like, we're supporting the composers who are coming up with those amazing ideas, those palettes. Hashem wrote some of my favorite music on Moon Knight, like, just amazing work.
Moon Knight is so good, the music.
Yeah,
I love
it's
it
really
so
good.
much.
Hashem is a mad genius. He's great. And so we're there supporting, ultimately it's a service position. So we're servicing composers, we're servicing directors, the studio, and everyone in between for all things music. So that means any songs that you see, as well as the score, we're cutting those in, trying to make them fit. You know, sometimes we have hundreds of alternate options that we're cutting to one scene to make work. And on the composer side of things for the score, we're supporting the composer however they need. And that varies a lot from project to project. That can look really different. Some composers, you know, just need someone to cover the dub, which is, you know, at the very end, we're doing all the music notes. And other times, you know, you're creating new music with their existing work. So it really varies, but the job is can be extremely creative, can be extremely technical, and there's paperwork as well. So you see it all.
And is
That's
this
so
typically like I know the industry is a very, like, stepping stone industry. You get one role to get a promotion to the next role. I know you mentioned you're freelance now, but do you feel like this is the kind of role that composers, the people who get credited with that they typically start in this role, or they are promoted into this role before at some point taking a leap into something like freelance?
Not really. So music editors and composers operate pretty independently. Like, they often work together, but every now and then you'll see a music editor become a composer, or vice versa, or someone who does both. But there are some music editors who don't even know how to read music because they just listen, and that's, you know, one way of doing it. There's a million ways to do the job, which makes it kind of it's really niche. It's like a bizarre job, but it's also really essential. And I think it's kind of what's the word for it? The unsung hero.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're at the end and, you know, they've already spent all this money recording orchestra, but they want a big change, you know, 2 days before final playback, and we have to deliver it in the studio. The music editor comes in and works magic with what material we do have. So a lot of times it just, the weird thing about being a music editor is if you've done a good job, no one will know that you did your job.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's no real I wouldn't say there's any promotion or anything. Like, I started as an assistant music editor, and I got promoted to being a music editor, just through having enough experience and knowing that having people trust that I could do the job.
Yeah.
It's all about trust.
Yeah. Do you have a group chat? Like, do you have a lot of other music editor friends out in LA? Is it like I'm assuming it's got to be a very smaller community of music editors.
Yeah, it's a pretty small community, so names get around pretty fast.
Yeah.
And it's even smaller in London. There's like 10 of them in London or something.
Wow.
And but yeah, there's groups with music editors. There's a lot of union resources where you can find music editors as well, but there's different houses like Formosa Group and things like that have just music editors ready to work. But most of the work comes from word of mouth, and just you get a phone call and says, hey, this person said that you might be available, or they recommended you. And that's kind of how it works in general.
I love hearing this. This is such an area of the business I knew nothing about. And it makes sense that you'd exist. Like the date, like that phone call that you might get of, we need more horns here, or we need to shorten this edit. Get the orchestra back in, and you're like, no, we don't have time. Let me see what I can do. Like, let me see the tools. That is such a scary call to get, I'd imagine. But it also sounds so fun, and it's not something I would ever think about. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it happens a lot. So we're all throughout post-production, and each project is different. But when I was at Marvel, it was like a very long stint, because we had so many projects happening at once, and some of them we were starting with temp music, which is where a music editor or picture editors do it too sometimes now. But a music editor will come in and create a temporary temp track of music for the scenes with existing scores. So that could be from John Williams, from, any composer. And it's all just for the director and the studio to have something to see, so that they're not just watching, especially for animation, it can be just pencil sketches. And so if they're just watching that with no music underneath, sometimes they want to see music with there and get a kind of idea. And then that creates a baseline for a composer to come in and say, directors can say, like, we love the temp here. So the composer can kind of use that as a tool to come up with something new. Or they say, we hate the temp here, which is equally as important. So they don't match that. And then it's all relationship based as well. So like, it's a conversation, and it's just it's really interesting going from the temp and then all the way to the dub, where you've now had the composers in, you've spotted everything, you've scored everything, and it's mixed and cut to picture, and then you have to keep cutting it as changes come in on the dub stage. So it's a long process. If you're a music editor, from like the fruition to the end, it can be 2 years, 3 years.
Wow. That's wild. And then on your website, and we'll link to this in the description of our podcast, there's also some original music you've done that I listened to. And
okay,
is this a goal of yours to be the composer one day? Because it sounds very cinematic.
Oh, thank you. I haven't written in quite a while. I think I fell in love with music editing, and I just didn't really know what it was until I was doing it. And I think my dream now would be to do a bit of both. But I think honestly, I'm someone who's like not a huge fan of the spotlight. So I liked playing the tuba and being in the back of the orchestra, and I like being behind a studio. So I think my dream would be to have a really good relationship with a composer where there's enough trust that they let me be really creative with what they have and creating new music out of their existing audio files.
Yeah.
Now, talking about editing existing audio files, I think about when I was in film school, there was an exercise we did where we would get a clip and we had to edit it 5 different ways to show different like genres or themes or tempos. Could you take one audio track and edit it in a different way to basically play with the tone like you would a video? Does that make sense? I'm trying to think of what the possibilities are there.
I've done some exercises before where I give myself a very limited amount of files and see how much I can make with it. And so the tools that they have nowadays where you can pitch things, you can reverse, you can add reverbs, delays, all sorts of, tricks. You can create a lot with very little. And I find that to be really fun. Obviously, most files that we're getting have it's like a full piece of music that I'm able to chop up and I can grab that, horn riser from that track and put it over here and cut it. And it's like puzzling, but fun and creative.
Yeah.
And then Christopher Nolan busts through the door and is like, reverse it. Put it in reverse.
More reverb. Yeah.
You know the Christopher Nolan wonk, right? That's what we all call it.
The famous sound. Becca, since you're
the famous Christopher Nolan wonk.
Yeah. Are there any if you could have any choice that you wanted, do you have any specific composers that you would love to say if you had the opportunity to work with anyone that you would love to work with, or who are your favorites, or any particular movie scores that you've enjoyed as you've been getting more into film?
Yeah, there are quite a few composers, and I've honestly been fortunate to meet a lot of them and get to chat with them, which has been really cool. And they're composers that I love working with and just would want to work with forever till the end of time.
Of course.
And I think that some of my favorite music, hard to say because they're all so different, but in this past few years, I would say the score that influenced me the most was Queen's Gambit, Carlos Rivera's score. His score ultimately got me my job at Marvel. So that's, if you think about it.
Yeah. Wow.
His score, I listened to his score before watching the show, and it made me want to watch the show. I listen to a lot of music, but don't always watch everything. So I listened to it and was like, I have to watch this. I have to know how I got from here to there and why. And it was just the growth of it was beautiful. And I also saw a podcast that he did with Tom Kramer, his music editor. And I was just like, these guys are so cool.
Yeah.
They just seem so cool. And I wanted to figure out how I could connect with them. And so I found Tom Kramer's email on IMDb, just on the internet, and reached out to him. And he, it was, I think this is where the COVID thing helped, was he answered me a day or so later and said, sure, yeah, we can, why don't you call me on Tuesday? And I was
that's cool.
Shocked. It was the first and only cold email I'd ever sent. And he just was so willing to chat with me as a recent graduate. And I think part of that is because everyone was working from home. And so we got on the phone, and the first thing he says to me is, I don't need an assistant. Music editors don't need, he was I just want to make that clear, don't need an assistant. Music editors don't really need assistants these days. You used to need assistants because they would you needed the hands. But not anymore with everything being digital. And so I said, oh, that's okay. I just appreciate you chatting with me. And so we talked for 20 minutes, and I didn't want to overstay my welcome. And I said, I only asked for 20. I'm not going to go over. And he said, oh, we can keep talking. And then we talked for an hour and a half.
What a Hollywood story.
By the end of the conversation, it was okay, well, I might have something in a month that I need a little bit of help with. So
that's amazing.
Contact you then. And so
yeah.
This goes back to the coolest person in the world thing.
Really?
Fine. I don't know. I saw somebody I kind of liked, so I emailed him, and he's like, "Yeah, cool, let's talk." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah,
this is inhuman.
He's the best, and he's one of my dearest friends out here now, and he's been my mentor this whole time. So he taught me more in 3 months working under him than my 5 years at Berkeley, like without a doubt. And so he calls me in a month and says, hey, I have a little project on the side that I need some help with. And it was with Carlos, the composer for Queen's Gambit. And so I was like, my dreams are coming true. And from there, I got my union days and like the work that qualified me for the union and got into the union. And then I didn't realize quite how involved with Marvel Tom was. I'd seen his IMDb and knew that he'd worked on like Endgame and Captain Marvel. He started off on Spielberg films, so he's just like crazy music editing genius. And I didn't realize how involved he was until when I went to start working for him. I got a call from his manager that said like, oh, we need you to sign this Marvel NDA. And I was like, huh? For what? And so, I mean, I wasn't working on any Marvel things at that point. I was helping him with another project, but I was just like, wait, what? And so from there, once I got into the union, then he got me into Marvel pretty soon after. And I was there for like 2.5 years working on different projects and just wrapped up in April. So it was an amazing experience. Yeah. And yeah, they're like Tom and Queen's Gambit, that score basically changed the trajectory of my life.
Oh, it's so funny. I just realized we keep mentioning movies and movie scores, but oh my God, like your whole IMDb is TV based and so is Queen's Gambit. But I think that this goes back to the conversation of that thin line between, you know, prestige TV and movies, which are going straight to streaming. The lines are separating right now.
Or you even mentioned it earlier about video games, which is, I imagine, like incredibly cinematic in how a music department might think about it as well.
Oh yeah, it's a complete different beast because everything has to loop. So it's even more like you have to create vertical and horizontal space for these audio tracks to loop properly depending on you bump into an enemy. Okay, it still has to, but you're like exploring, so it still has to flow from exploring music into enemy music and then out gracefully. So like all sorts of different triggers, and it's very complicated. I would love to do more of that because it just seems so just like a new challenge. That would be really interesting to navigate. But yeah, it's weird too because like the high-end TV, like you were saying, is the scores are really incredible. Like the same thing happened with Severance. I don't know if y'all have seen Severance, but that score also same thing. Listen to it and it's like, I have to watch this show because how did they go from here to there? Like it was so crazy and really brilliant and well done.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I know. Becca, do you have like favorite video game scores? I'm not as well versed in that world. Or do you have like a...
Let's see. I think there's like definitely nostalgia factor. I've been playing a lot of Skyrim lately again for like the third time where I just restart Skyrim. And that, it just, I'm amazed at how it holds up so well. Their sound design, their music, like it really does one like really great job. But I also really love the music for like Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door because it's just classic. And they redid it for the new release that came out. What was that, last week? And it sounds great. Like they re-recorded it or actually recorded it. I don't know if they ever did in the original, probably not. But it's like, it's so cool hearing kind of a more elevated version of the soundtrack. Yeah, it's interesting.
Do you feel like when you watch a TV show, a movie, play a video game, that because of your job, you're so focused on sort of the technical presentation of the music more than you were before? Can you enjoy anything anymore is what I'm asking.
That's such a hard one because I always thought like I will never let this like get to me. And I think when I was starting off and I was an assistant and I didn't know as much of the job, it was not problematic. But since being really involved in like full-on music editing now, there are definitely times there's been like in a couple shows recently that I'm like, oh, I heard that music edit. Or it's like, oh, I heard that cut. Oh, I heard that. Like,
well, there's a movie. I forget what movie it was. Was it Ferrari, where they actually kept a temp score from a different movie, and they're like, it sounds good enough, and kept it. maybe it wasn't Ferrari, but there was a movie that I was listening about recently where they just kept the temp score because they thought it sounded
happens.
fun. Yeah.
It happens. Sometimes the music editor does too good of a job on the temp, and it actually causes problems down the line. So you have to strike a delicate balance of like good enough for the director to get the idea, but not so good that you like that they have what's called temp love, and then a composer comes in, tries to do something new, and everyone's like, we don't want it. You can really set someone up for failure.
Well, it sounds like dating.
I like the term temp love. Temp love.
Yeah.
Dating
temp
is just
love.
temp love.
Yeah.
Until marriage. Ethan says that to me all the time. I do. Ethan, when you so this is kicking off our month-long conversation about film scores, and we're going to deep dive into John Williams. We're going to deep dive into various film scores that we love. Ethan and Caroline, when you think about the idea of film scores, what pops into mind? And it can be TV or video game related as well.
Ethan, you can go first.
I read an article somewhat recently about John Williams, and it was an article that said that Raiders of the Lost Ark came out in 1981. Raiders of the Lost Ark does not need its iconic score. There are people who have done edits of that movie, and it is not needed. You could have it be in silence, and that movie still works. You could have a totally different tone to what Williams wrote, and it would feel different, and that movie would still work. And then 1982, E.T. comes out, and that movie fully would not work without the score. The score is actually the most important character. And because my initial reaction to that question, Eli, would be like essential, like sort of like the keeper of where my emotions are going. But in the case of that example, with the same composer, with the same director, in two movies that are absolute classics that came out 2 years apart, there's just such a different feeling about how essential they actually are. So I don't know if I have a good answer. I hope we find a good one over the course of this month. But when I think of film scores, I just think of like, man, like that's it. It wells up my emotion. Like whatever my emotion is supposed to be is usually captured in the score.
I've sort of discovered more as I've gotten more into writing the last few years. I can't write with music with lyrics, so I mostly write to film scores. So I have a full playlist. Like I think it's hard to, if we're going to talk about scores, Nicholas Britell and the Succession theme song, I think, is one of our greatest like musical scores like of the last several years. I mean, that everyone knows that theme song and the chords that he did within that. But I really enjoy like Hans Zimmer and a lot of the stuff that he's done with Nancy Meyers. I write a lot to the Father of the Bride soundtrack, and I think that it does a way of like really creating the world for yourself, like separate from the film, and how it cues your emotions, like Ethan was saying, and it has a way of really guiding you through the film. And I think it's so interesting. I don't know. I think like as we're like discovering this, like what the relationship is like when they're writing the score and what they've seen of the movie and things like that. And I think that they work so in tandem together. And I think it's hard to think of movies without music.
So I talked about the idea of tone and exposition and furthering a scene or a story beyond what you see on the screen. And I immediately go to horror films. And I want to talk about, we've talked about it a couple times on this podcast, but there's a movie in theaters right now, whose name I'm spacing on, In a Violent Nature. Do you know what they do with the score in A Violent Nature, either of you?
No.
There is no score. It's all natural sound.
Oh.
It's a slasher film without a score. Because what they did is they flipped the perspective. Instead of being from the perspective of the victims of the serial killer, you're just following the serial killer. And instead of like a wah, wah, or a ding, 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 ding. That's good, right? Or a wonk, a Christopher Nolan wonk. Instead of those, you hear like leaves under his feet. That's the whole score. And it's fascinating because any film school, any breakdown of horror film will say the score is the most important piece. But because it is playing with the tropes of horror movies, by taking away the sound, it makes it scarier. By taking away the safety net of knowing something's about to happen because you hear it in the score, it kind of makes it scarier because you don't know what's about to happen. Anyway, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think the lack of score can be sometimes way more impactful than wall-to-wall score. And so many shows, movies, everything is just wall-to-wall, nonstop music. That when it's gone, it's just like something wrong is really happening, or, you know, it really changes how you feel.
We naturally know the tropes so well that a change in trope fucks with you a little. And I love that. It's really cool.
Yeah. It can be so much more impactful, I think, for like really sad or like a tragedy. If there's no music, sometimes I think that's even because you're just sitting with it and you have to deal with that. Like there's no safety net. Yeah.
I also like when composers make their own instruments or use things like you've never heard before. Like I watched this documentary about Danny Elfman, and it showed him working on a ton of weird, like he was walking through his studio and he has like 300 instruments that you've never seen before, like just giant bells, and he hits it and you're like, oh, that's the sound from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Or hey, that's, I don't know, an Oingo Boingo backup thing that he just started playing. It's really cool to me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's one audio file that was just a music editor screaming, and it was like warped enough that it sounded like something completely different.
The Christopher Nolan
That's
wonk is just him burping into the it's just him burping into the mic, and they reversed it and doubled it, and that's wonk.
Yeah.
Rebecca, this was a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. You talked about areas of the business I never knew about and never thought about, and now I'm going to think about it. I have one last question for you, though. The Oscars used to have a sound mixing and a sound editing Oscar. That's since changed. Right now, it's just best sound. Is that right? What about music? Where are my music editors' Oscars? What the fuck?
I know.
Rebecca, change the industry. Stand up, scream.
There was, I think it was Alex Gibson. There was one music editor that did actually win an Oscar because he did so much work on the sound. I think it was for Dunkirk. Someone please fact check this later. But I'm like,
Like a
wonk.
That's
like,
all he did.
His music editing was like, ended up being, I can't remember the whole story, but it ended up being so
That's
integral
really cool.
to sound as well that
That's
he won
amazing.
an Oscar. But yeah, there's no music editing category for the Oscars.
Anybody listening to this, I want you to watch your TV shows. I want you to watch your movies, and I want you to email your music editors. I want you to watch the credits.
We
email those music
are gonna
editors.
fly to LA, and we're all gonna bring flags, and we are gonna storm
Academy.
Even
Museum.
stop pitching
The red
this.
carpet.
Even every
And
week.
I think
Every
that
week
this
you guys have
November
done-
we are going to take the Oscars back.
Also, bring back Kevin Spacey. He's just sitting there.
Oh,
I
boy.
didn't say that. You said
more.
that.
Hey, Becca, where can everybody find you if they want to like learn more about you?
I'm on Instagram. Becca is my username, and I think that's really I haven't updated my website in a while. I should probably check on that. So, yeah, that's probably the best way to reach out, or you can email me at rshran@gmail.com. And that's that.
Do you have a policy where if someone cold emails you, you have to respond now because of your story?
I do a lot of paying it forward. I do talk to a lot of people about music editing in the industry and trying to help as many people as I can because someone took a chance on me, so I had to pay it forward. And I want to.
Amazing.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for listening. You can visit us at ineedtosee.that.com or email us at ineedtosee.that.pod@gmail.com. And as always,
Pay It Forward is actually a movie that has Kevin Spacey in it with Haley Joel Osment.
And Helen Hunt.
Yeah, Helen Hunt's in that too.
wonk. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Becca.
Becca.
Thank
Good to
you.
see you.
Thank you so much. This
Nice
was great.
meeting you.